The Coffee People podcast is presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. Roastery is a digital printing company that makes custom printed packaging for coffee products. They work with small, mid, and large coffee roasters nationwide. Go to roastery.com to learn more about their fast turnaround times, high-quality packaging products, sustainability efforts, and low printing minimums, which enable your small business to tell a really big story. If you are ready to upgrade those coffee bags, go to roastery.com. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast, which is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network and presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. If you're a small business roasting excellent coffee that you want to showcase in some sturdy, well-crafted, recyclable cans, perhaps ones already decorated for the holidays, you'll find what you're looking for at roastery.com. I'm Ryan Woldt, and this is the Coffee People podcast, where we meet interesting people connected to the world of coffee. We're dropping this episode a day early, so you have something to listen to on your way to Thanksgiving, and so that we can wish today's guest, Ben Wilde, a happy early birthday, which he's celebrating tomorrow. Be sure to hit up his social medias. You'll find those links in this show's podcast notes or on roastwestcoast.com. Ben, along with his wife Kina, is the founder of multiple businesses, including Pacifica Renew, a specialty green coffee importer with a direct connection to China, and Chinatown Coffee Roasters in Los Angeles. And Ben is one of these people that just can't stop. In fact, between our original chat and our plan to record this show, Ben and his wife started another roastery in Utah. It's a lot to dig into, so I'm going to let him explain it all during this Coffee People podcast conversation. So wherever you are, I hope you've got a hot cup of coffee and you're enjoying the drive, because it's time for another Coffee People conversation, this time with Ben Wilde. Well, why don't we get started? It's as simple as me asking you and you telling me who you are. What's your name and what's your company name and what's your role there?
Sure, yeah, my name is Ben. Sometimes I go by Benito for fun. My parents they either called me Benji, Benjamin, or Ben. And sometimes I was called Benjamin. So because I had a lot of nicknames as I got older, I gave myself Benito. But yeah, it's Ben. Last name is Wilde, like the Old English with E at the end. No relation to Oscar. My wife and I founded two companies. One focuses on importing specialty green coffee called Pacifica Renew. That was when we were living in the Bay Area. We lived on the East Bay, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then we founded Chinatown Coffee Roasters when we had moved to LA, specifically Chinatown, LA. So obviously one just deals with importing and supply, and the other deals with roasting, wholesale roasting.
What were you doing before you got into coffee?
I've been for probably, I'd say since 2006, involved in the recycling industry. And it really, when it started, my wife and I had a completely different business, which is too long to go into. And we started, and we didn't want to stress it with financials by drawing an income. So we agreed I'd go out and get like a quasi part-time job that we could live off dirt poor, and she'd run the day-to-day operations. And that was 2005. I then, a few months into that, we launched that program, and I just found a company that was looking for their first employee. They were a recycling startup, very low key. They specialized in paid pickup recycling service, everything from residential, commercial to business. And they said, hey, we just need a capable guy. It was a husband and wife team, real cool. They're not around anymore. I'd shout them out. But and they wanted me to just manage it. So I got into recycling, and one thing led to another. I spent time driving forklifts, sorting through, smelly, nasty recyclables, buying and assessing metals and electronic scrap. So I've really worked in all facets of recycling. But eventually my skill set was more in just communication, account management, I guess, quote unquote sales, but I don't know. I don't like to think of myself as a sales guy because I always hate sales guys when I meet them. So yeah, so recycling. And then that's partially how I guess I'm segueing out of recycling. So when we fell in love with specialty coffee was probably 2011. So I had already been doing recycling, I guess, what is that, 6 years or 5 years at that point. And it was a cool little cafe called Element in Cabrillo there in Ventura County. We lived in the Bay Area, and I would often go do some business with some recyclers in SoCal, LA or Anaheim, San Diego, wherever. And I just stopped off randomly. My family was traveling we were all traveling together. This guy starts rambling about this thing called third wave coffee. You really got to try your espresso plain. I never thought of myself as like a coffee expert. Neither did my wife. We just, fine, yeah, let's drink some coffee, sure. And it was excellent. It turns out it was Verve Coffee Roasters. We all know them now, one of the OGs. And it was just a double ristretto, and it was, fruity and zesty, all the stuff that we all now think of as like, of course, right? But at the time, it was mind blowing. So that turned us on to specialty coffee, which of course that's kind of late in the game compared to a lot of guys, but that was just our journey. I'd say the second place we found good coffee was, again, randomly, we were in Pasadena. We went to the Intelligentsia there on Colorado Street, which is still there today. Actually, they just barely remodeled. I tried to go a couple months ago and the door was closed. I was like, oh no, but it's open again. They were just fixing up the lobby. So Verve, then Intelligentsia. That was the order of my specialty coffee exposure. Two of the OGs, really.
That's really interesting. Actually, that
Yeah.
Intelligentsia on Colorado is the second craft coffee roaster that I ever went to.
Oh, that's cool. That's both our second.
I used to live right down the street from there. When we first moved to California, it was not far from that spot. So that was my local spot.
Wow, that's cool. Hey, when you first went, did they have like a cartoon artistic rendering of David Bowie on the wall? Did you ever see that by chance? They had a bunch of cool artwork, but that one sticks out to me.
It sounds familiar, but it was a long time ago. I know they served wine, and I really liked that because I would just stay all day drinking
Transition
coffee.
to your booze in the evening.
And I'd be like, well, it's 3:00, and they serve the wine at 3, so that seems reasonable.
Yeah, I mean,
That was
I don't have a problem. I mean, they're serving it. These are very legit, upstanding people. No, I'm just kidding.
It seems like a
That's
classy
cool.
place. Granted,
Yeah.
I'm an early to bed kind of guy.
Oh yeah. So 3:00 for you, that's like 7 for the
For
average
most,
Joe.
yeah. I don't go to sleep, but I do get into bed early. Well, that's really interesting that's kind of how it was just that pulling off the road and starting got you excited about craft coffee. But getting excited about a good cup of coffee is a long way away from getting into business. How did you get into, like, what
Yeah.
was the next
Yeah.
step for you? Where did you go from just drinking craft coffee at coffee shops to thinking, I want this to be part of my life?
Yeah, it was. Well, it was fairly economically motivated. Well, I mean, I guess on the one hand, my wife and I both kind of grew up like just, I don't know, what do you call it anymore, working class. So we're kind of DIYers. We were not like super DIYers. We like spending money and having people doing stuff for us, but we also like to learn things and do it ourselves. And we lived in an expensive place, didn't have a home, so we paid killer rents that just went up every year. And so we didn't have a ton of money to be dropping $25 a bag once a week because we liked the coffee and we were drinking it not just once a day, right? So it was very practical. I thought, I wonder if there's a way we could like roast our own coffee that's this good so we don't go bankrupt funding this lovely new habit. And so, you turn to the interwebs, turn to the internet, and I don't know if it was some people I forget. Definitely Sweet Maria's was one of the influences. They're out there, great for home roasters. But the first thing I got was just, try it in a pan with a spoon. And then I bought the old Whirly popcorn hand crank machine and upgraded to a modified air popper, that whole thing. Bought a Baymore. But that was 20, I want to say, I say 2015 because I don't want to overstate it. It could have been late 2014, but right around there, maybe early 2015 is when those first experiments started. Of course, I quickly realized, okay, I'm going to figure out how to roast, although this is kind of hard, but it's really fun. Now I realize there's such a thing as like, you got to start with good green coffee. You can't just roast anything. So shout out to a really cool roastery in Fremont, California called Devout Coffee, because we lived in Fremont. They don't know me, I don't think, but they started as a little coffee cart. And I, of course, by then was on to the, hey, there's such a thing as good coffee. So I'm like, I found Chromatic. Hyber's a great guy there in the South Bay. There was obviously plenty of North Bay, San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, great roasters that did the light roast, third wave, specialty style. But there wasn't really anything in the South Bay other than Chromatic and that I knew of. So they opened a cart, I think, in 2013 and started remodeling a building in 2014, I want to say. And so that I was so stoked. Me and my wife started regularly going in there. And they were nice enough to just sell us a pound of our first specialty coffee, which was a Costa Rican. I don't know which farm. I don't know which area. I just know it's from Costa Rica. Maybe Santa Maria, actually. Anyways, so I just said, I'm trying to learn to roast. Can you get me some good green? And then later I found Sweet Maria's and was able to directly start buying Yurgachev and all this different stuff. So that was probably 2015. By 2016, I think I had the Baymore, and then Keen and I could experiment with different roast profiles. Keena's my wife. My wife and I could experiment with different roast profiles with the Baymore, and then we started feeling, now it's starting to actually come close to the taste of the good stuff. On the air popper, it was interesting. We knew how to not get to second crack and ruin it, but it couldn't get the consistency, the repeatability. But once we had the Baymore, it was a good enough piece of machinery that all the stuff we were reading and YouTube videos we were watching could be applied better. So that got us on that road.
It's really incredible how you can learn on your own. And at some point in that process, you thought, this is good enough to give to other people. Not only is it good enough to let other people taste it, it's good enough to ask them for money in return. Do you remember what that feeling was like?
Yeah, my wife's more humble than me. She's always like, no. Like, first of all, like, we're busy, and second of all, like, just chill. Even if it is pretty good, let's not assume it's good enough that anyone's going to want it, right? So we give it, but when you give it to friends and the in-laws and whoever, and they go, oh, and people that have had specialty coffee, and then you don't know if they're lying to you because they're friends and in-laws, right? But it seemed the feedback was good. So 2016, was when we contemplated actually maybe we should start a little roastery just for fun on the side, but we didn't, But so just really we were super beginners, but because I think we have that DIY, maybe you call it an entrepreneurial spirit, we kind of think no matter what we're doing, part of the journey is to engage in that market. And so it wasn't that you have to be an expert before you can sell or engage in a business. It's just you need to know where you're at, be honest with it to yourself and to your potential customers. But no, we obviously didn't jump into it that early, but we started talks probably a year or so into our little home roasting adventures, just amongst ourselves, exploring the idea.
So then when does that transition into a business? Did the roasting business come first, or did the importing business come first?
Pretty much simultaneously. So I founded Pacifica Renew. We're in the Bay Area. This is right before we decided to move to LA. We didn't know at the time, obviously, we're going to move to LA. But and I found it thinking I would do something in recycling. So I didn't come up with the name Pacifica Renew as a coffee importing company. I just thought I'm going to start a company. There's other stuff not related to my main recycling that I can do. There's no conflict, and I'll just start this business. Then we moved to LA. I'm not really paying attention. We get to LA, we get to Chinatown. My wife brings it up randomly, like it would be really fun, to take our weekly roasting and maybe make it to where we're roasting daily instead of weekly, on our little 1 kilo bullet, right? Elio bullet. So I'm like, oh yeah. It just reminded me of those talks we'd had years in the past. And maybe it's because we had just moved. Maybe it's because COVID was still sort of in this, we'd been into this probably 2020 or 2021, maybe early 2021. COVID's been going, but it's new, or not new. I guess it's maybe the middle of it. I can't remember the dates anymore, but maybe it was all of these environmental factors that made us just feel that creative. Yeah, let's do it. No pressure. I have my recycling industry income. That's how we live. We can do it right. We can focus on quality and good customer relations and just do something we're proud of. And so and we live in Chinatown. We roast in our kitchen here in Chinatown. Let's call it Chinatown Coffee Roasters. Super simple. and then and so we're like, cool, let's do it. So we start working on logo designs and all that. And what prompted the conversion of Pacifica Renew into a coffee company was probably, I don't know if it was in the first few weeks or possibly first few months, we thought, I thought, well, okay, I now know of a handful of good quality specialty coffee importers that we buy from and had been for years now at that point. But I think it'd be neat to establish relationships directly with farms and import some ourselves and just try that. And I thought, oh, wait, I already know importing and exporting. I do that in the recycling industry because sometimes a specific metal or type of paper will go to Missouri, and other times it'll go to Alberta, Canada, another time it'll go to Guangzhou, So I basically had a freight forwarder that worked, not worked for me as an employee, but was my regular freight forwarder. I knew customs procedures, importing, exporting, Incoterms, all of this stuff. I'm like, oh, so if I can just go meet some farms, then I can employ my logistics capabilities, and that won't be my weakness. My weakness will be the coffee side because neither of us felt like we're these experts. We're not Q graders, right? We're just passionate coffee geeks that by this time had 5 or 6 years of specialty coffee experience under our belts, but not professionally, just, closeted home coffee geeks, right? So we did. Decided to convert Pacifica Renew. I was like, well, that's already incorporated. I got the name, I got the logo, let's just do it. And so we could have, I guess, just done it all through Chinatown, but I thought, well, no, I like this because if I'm successful with these farms and bringing it in, I think people will want to buy it from us, and it'd be nice to just have it as its own standalone business. I can focus more on this. You can Keena can focus more on Chinatown Coffee Roasters, but really we just both focused on both. We just have our strengths and weaknesses, and just kind of try to complement each other. So that was how Pacifica Renew got brought into the coffee scene for us.
If you heard me laughing a moment ago, it was only because you thought at the beginning what wasn't quite maybe the height of the pandemic era, the easy part of your job would be to just go meet some farmers overseas.
Yeah, no, it's that didn't turn out to be as easy as we thought.
And you started a coffee company with a focus on Chinatown in LA, but also I know you have a kind of a passion for Chinese coffees, which I think is really unique. But during a time where there wasn't a lot of great local domestic news about our relationship with China and the
Yeah,
pandemic, and that I'm
yeah.
not saying, hey, that's the way it should be or shouldn't be, just saying that was the
Oh no, sure.
reality. There was a
The
lot of
reality,
fear
right?
around that relationship. And so how did you go about approaching a farm and the first farm and saying, hey, I'm a guy who wants to import coffee to America?
Right. Our very first farm is still a great one called the El Carmen Estate in El Salvador. And we were very much like, we want this to be fun, right? We don't want to take shortcuts. We want quality and enjoyment. This is about passion, right? We still don't pay ourselves anything from these companies. All the money just goes back into trying to grow them. So we thought, okay, here's how we should do it. The whole family will go out there and we'll find some people that speak English because yo no hablo español, right? Neither does my wife. And we'll just pay some random tourist guides to take us on some coffee excursions. And I know enough about coffee that I could spot something close to specialty coffee. Again, I'm not a Q grader. My wife's not a Q grader, but we thought, we could find at least pretty good coffee. And then it's a matter of the skills I already have, which is relationship building. So find the place, meet the people, bring home samples, sample roast those. And if we fall in love with it between cupping it at the farms, sampling it at home, then a lot of it's the hard part of, do you trust each other? How do you put together logistics and payment terms? But I've done that for 15, 16 years in recycling. So for me, that's not the hard part. But that I can get how for most people, that's probably the risky part. The easy part for most people is probably they grew up, they've worked for other traders. They're like super good at coffee. That was a little bit more of our weakness. But I felt like if we just go do it in person, there's a little bit of naivety, like, you can find good people if you try to treat people good. That was kind of how we did it.
Sure.
And it was great. They were really friendly, specifically at El Carmen. Went out 2 days later again, just by myself that time, because the kids can only, they were touring the farms with us, right? They can only take so much of it because it's, 100 million% humidity and they're a bunch of city slickers. So went out again, did some additional sampling, a meeting with them, and great. So that's been our philosophy, is just try to be genuine and straightforward and hopefully the good guys will surface and the sketchy ones will disappear.
I have to be honest, I'm kind of sitting here thinking, man, what a ballsy, no fear move to do that and to do that with your family. But I also think that's a great way to get things done because you figure out what your weaknesses are. You make mistakes quickly. You know, move fast and break things was like a startup era mentality.
Yeah, that's a good, I remember that phrase. That's probably a little bit of how my wife and I have generally operated,
Sure.
which has its downsides, but it's.
The award-winning Moster Coffee isn't just a place for coffee. It's a place for great beer and food and remote working and the telling of stories and uplifting the community. Not just the craft coffee community, but the communities Moster Coffee serves and the greater world. The Moster Coffee Company was started to help farmers around the globe build generational wealth for their families. While you can purchase a cappuccino and a latte anywhere, Moster wanted to create coffee for their customers that not only tastes good, but does good. Learn more about Moster Coffee's impact on mostercoffee.com and follow at Moster Coffee on social media to be inspired by the founders, Bev, Jaylyn, Sam, and Mike, who've gone above and beyond to create a coffee circle that strengthens all of those around them. At mostercoffee.com, you'll find your next favorite cup of coffee. When I met you in person, we talked a little bit about the Chinese coffee connection. China isn't a place that I normally
Hmm.
think of when I think of specialty coffee. Why did that change for you, or why was that something that you got interested in, that region?
Yeah, well, I'm super glad and love talking about Yunnan and Chinese coffee because, like, even now, like, it's a small emerging coffee, specialty coffee origin, right? And Pacifica Renew, Chinatown, very small companies. It's fair to say nobody knows us, or pretty much nobody. And I'm already like super proud of it, as if it's like some legacy. Normally 10, 20 years later, you look back and go, wow, but like, it's just so cool because it was a little bit of luck. Like, props to Kina, to my wife, for saying, hey, we're in Chinatown and our kids, are doing the Mandarin immersion program. We did a lot with Chinese stuff in the Bay Area. We're roasting in Chinatown. We really hit it off with our partner Alex, a longtime resident, antique shop owner. And she's just like, well, maybe we should find and see if there's any good coffee in China. And of course, she's sort of like, although that's probably not a thing. And I quickly add, oh, yeah, there's no good coffee in China, because that's just always been the mantra, which understandably, it earned that mantra by not having good coffee for a long time. But it was still like, oh, wait, again, this is because of just my very odd recycling career. Of I always had to find new recycling material, recycling facilities, if you will, and I had to consult and meet with them, work with them, find same thing, find the good ones and avoid the sketchy ones. And I had to find the matching processors that were looking for materials that recycler would produce. That's kind of the way you would describe what my career has always been, is I sort of bring the end user and the generator together, right? So I'm like, wait, I know how to do this, only it's coffee. And we're doing it in the other sense, but it's a little bit harder because there's not like you can just land in China and it's a small country with coffee farms everywhere. It's like, and at this time we can't fly to China, right? So instead I'm like, well, I whip out my WeChat app because I'm always talking to my Chinese friends and business associates on WeChat. That's the preferred app over there over WhatsApp. And I asked my buddy Alex there in Chinatown, who owns the antique shop, which are little roasteries in the back of. I say, Alex, you think my Mandarin translating is really slow, and I don't speak any, obviously. Do you think you could find some specialty coffee chat groups, or I don't care, articles? I said, I'm looking, but by the time it's translated into English, it's not very useful, right? So he helps me out. He said, okay, yeah, let me look. He turns me on to a couple chat groups with each like 2,000 people. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, fine. I'll just dive in, and I just translating like a maniac. But they were so kind. This was all mainland Chinese people, zero foreigners. And they're like, oh, we have a foreigner in our forum. Like, so they're like cheering, yay, welcome, welcome non-Chinese person. I'm like, oh, great, thank you. This is so polite of you guys. And then I just have a conversation like, hey, do you guys know what specialty coffee is? I mean, I don't know if they just talk about like Starbucks, or are they specialty geeks? And it turns out it's all of the above. So a lot of the clatter was whatever, I just got a Frappuccino because Starbucks opened up in Shanghai, or yeah, I'm a farmer and I'm experimenting with, carbonic maceration, or so, it was like the whole
Wow.
spectrum. So obviously, then it's finding the ones that are interested in the dialogue, and then it was having the breakout where you just the two of you start chatting. Okay, are you a farmer? Are you claiming you're a farmer and you're not a farmer? Are you saying, no, I'm not a farmer, but I know some guys and I'm just going to introduce you? Or no, I know some guys and I want to be a broker and make money? Like, all possible options. But it worked great. Met a handful of farms, started getting some samples in the mail, and then simultaneously came across, this was on, I think, Instagram, Indochina Coffee. Shout out to those guys in the UK. They are the London or the entire European representative for Yunnan coffee traders. So that is how, I believe it was through them. I'm going to say it was through them, even if it wasn't exactly, because I was all over the place. Every possible channel I was pursuing. I got introduced to the founders of Yunnan coffee traders in Yunnan. And that was beautiful because they were literally all about specialty coffee, all about, they had been there for years developing this new emerging coffee scene. And I don't want to give them all the credit, but they should get a huge chunk of the credit for working with farms, investing real dollars and time, and producing the incredible coffee scene that's now there in Yunnan. That's really how we made the relationships. There had been some attempts to ship this the new crop, because I believe the first crop was probably 3 to 4 years ago. So by the time I'm talking with them, they had probably had one crop. Now they'll probably listen to this and correct me, but it was something like that. And they had tried with a few different big and small coffee importers to develop the North American market for it. And it kind of hadn't gone anywhere, nothing long term. Some people were capable, but not fully interested. Others were interested, but just didn't know how to do it. And I was just this small guy, of course, I hadn't heard of, gung ho reaching out. And I said, well, I'm not a big deal. I couldn't like immediately sell. I was like, I don't even know if I can sell 10,000 pounds, right? Or whatever, 5 tons, but I am passionate. I'm excited. I found you. But as far as the logistics, yeah, I can handle that no problem. They're like, I think they were a little skeptical, like, yeah, no, everyone messes up on the logistics. I'm like, serious, like I've worked in this other industry not related to coffee, and pretty confident I can, handle all of it. I can pick it up at the farm gate if you need me to, but I don't care. We'll do CNF and I'll pick it up at the port and get it into the US and do it. So we just did a trial pallet load, and I thought it went good. I assumed they thought it went fine. And that was my first little baby shipment. I think it was like 10 bags or something that Pacifica Renew brought in. And then we later talked with them, followed up, I don't know how many months later, and they were sufficiently happy. I don't want to speak for them, but they said, hey, this went good. And I said, great, it went good on my end too. I love working with you guys. Your coffee's just like the samples, which is always a good sign when the shipment arrives. And I'm starting to sell samples to people and give samples to people. And the response is as I expected, that they're like, wow, they're shocked, surprised, and loving it. And they said, well, we really are looking for a North American partner. I'm like, oh, like, what are you saying? Like, I'm super flattered that this is going where I think it's going. And they said, yeah, like, let's try it. We know you're small and you're not like super connected in the coffee industry, but you could grow this. And I said, I think I can grow it too. There's that risk that I fail, but it shouldn't be on the logistics side of it. It should be on the, I don't know how to sell coffee side of it. So we inked a deal, and I became Pacifica Renew. We became the North American import and selling partner for Yunnan coffee traders.
That's a heck of a story, Ben. On this side of the deal, when the coffee arrives here, how much work do you have to put in educating your clients on the coffee you're bringing in from China? I mean, are people kind of shocked? Like, it's not like I go to my regular coffee place and see a lot of Chinese coffees on the menu.
No, it's all over. Like, luckily, as you noticed from just kind of a lot of the story and the history of us getting into coffee, both my wife and I are pretty, like, I don't know, we're interesting, we're curious, and we're not necessarily afraid to try stuff, because that's really helpful. Because pretty much if you bring up China, as you mentioned, not just during COVID, but before and after, and whether or not you call it propaganda or news, clearly the headlines, it's a complicated topic. And so every cafe I'm talking with, that roaster, cafe and roastery, I don't know if they're going to come back. I've had things like, I will not buy coffee from China because fill in the blank, something super negative, maybe true, maybe not. We don't need to get into politics. Or others, I had a lady from China come up crying saying, "Oh my gosh, this is so great. I didn't know my people in my country could produce specialty coffee. I always thought we had bad coffee." And I was like, "Oh, I'm like honored to give you a cup here." So the whole spectrum, but you have no idea where it's going to go. I mean, Colombian coffee, whatever, El Salvador, anywhere else, it's pretty straightforward. Nobody gets mad and calls you a communist for selling Ethiopian coffee, right? Or nobody, people have gotten mad at me because I'm not Chinese. Like, well, what right do bringing in Chinese coffee? I'm like, I don't get it. Why would I have to be Chinese to bring in Chinese? I'm not El Salvadorian, right? I'm just a coffee lover, and those people are beautiful and they have great farms, and I'm in love with their coffee, and they want me to. I mean, everything is good, So it's just a very China is a hot topic, but I don't mind that. I feel like it's mostly fun. Sometimes it's stressful, but mostly it's fun to try to do our best as just these random Americans to give a fair representation to some excellent farms in an emerging origin. And usually the best thing to do is just give them the coffee and it speaks for itself. They go, "Wow, that was good." I mean, I try to undersell it, if anything, so that they'll be that much more shocked. We bring in 5 coffees and they cup, and I try not to emphasize cup score because I think that can get a little ridiculous, but it's one of the factors that matters, right? But they cup between 83 and 87, depending on the Q grader. So these are great coffees. Yeah, they're not the award-winning Panama Geisha or whatever, but like this is the Catamore variety is everything they're working with, and they're doing natural honey and wash processes depending on the farm and wash station. So it's great coffee. In our own roastery, we roast everything single origin, and then we'll make what I call single origin blends. So we blend after roasting it, so you still kind of get it's like the 1+1 is 5 or 3. The sum of the whole is greater than the some of the parts, or however you say that. But the idea is to create a high quality blend by pairing the coffees afterwards, and it goes great. Like our Dong Ka washed, very nutty and chocolatey. You put that with our Guaban natural or Guaban honey, and you get this like touch of fruitiness, little funky after notes. But it makes a great espresso blend. Things like that. Sorry, that was a tangent. You weren't asking about my roast profiles, but
I love it. This is going to be the easiest show for me to edit because I'm just going to see all this, language on your side, and my side's going to be empty. It's perfect.
yeah.
You've mentioned your wife several times, Kina. What's it like working together with your spouse and with your family, having them involved in what you're doing? Because there's a lot of different pots working. And as someone who tried to make beer with his wife once and almost got divorced, where do you see the
Yeah,
benefits
no,
and the challenges, and how does that work? How do you separate
right.
the two? The relationship from the business, the working part.
Well, we're not the like super idea. We're somewhere in the middle. Like we can work together, but we also just have to like carve out our that's your thing and I won't interrupt and this is my thing and you don't interrupt. Try to just have boundaries. And then like in the bigger sense of the whole family, we've always tried to travel together. I've always worked from home in the recycling industry and traveled a lot. And a good percentage of the time, it's always cost us a lot of money, but we've always tried to have the family come with me because my business would cover my expense and then we would cover the rest of the plane tickets or the car travel or whatever it is. So we've always, as a family, done a okay job at enjoying being around each other and mixing business with non-business in a way that I don't know. Some people would say doesn't work, but we think it works good enough. We still like each other. So mostly I just say it's fun.
Yeah, as long as it works for you, that's all that matters.
Right. We're a little weird.
When I was getting ready for this show, I realized that in the time since I've seen you, you've started kind of a new operation in Utah. I'm hoping you can tell me a little bit about that. Namely, how
Yeah.
to pronounce it, because I don't want to screw it up.
Oh yeah. So it's Quichapa Coffee. So the idea behind Utah. So we have family in Utah, and like we're fairly private, so I don't get into too many details. But there's for various reasons we felt okay. We were traveling. It's about 6 hour drive from LA. It's a very southern portion of Utah. It's closer to Vegas than Salt Lake City, for instance. 2.5 hours from Vegas, 6 hours from LA. So we were making that drive a ton. sometimes flying, but usually just driving for family reasons. We got to the point where like, look, other than the roastery, we don't have to be in LA. I work from home. We can try to figure something out for various family reasons. Let's start spending more time in Utah. So we decided to get a place in Utah and downsize in LA. And this has all been over the past like 6 or so months, like fairly recent. But as we were planning to do that, we thought, well, geez, then that'd be kind of cool. We could open another roastery based there in Utah and just kind of at first we thought, oh, yeah, it'd be another branch of Chinatown. We're like, I don't know, Chinatown's about Chinatown. I mean, it's really about America, because Chinatown is this really cool mix of literally the Chinese workers from nearly 200 years ago coming in and being forced into these neighborhoods and then making the ghetto into something beautiful. But then here, all this time later, it's to me, it's very American. It's like, good luck defining Chinatown, right? Like, what are its roots? Where is it now? Who are the people? What are those people's identities? And you're like, well, their identities change how far you go back, right? It's mostly Southeast Asians there at this point, or just random, all Americans, I guess you might say, in artist lofts, right? So Chinatown is a very unique place that we just love. We love the one in San Francisco. We visit them in other cities. We just thought, no, it's a standalone. We don't want to set up another Chinatown Coffee Roasters anywhere else. So we thought, well, let's just do something totally different, but still emphasis on the fundamentals of good coffee. And Quichapa is a local Paiute. So this is former Paiute country before the European, whatever, white, or what do you call them, Mormon pioneers came here like in the 1860s, I think. I'm in Utah right now, by the way. So that's why I say here. The Paiutes call a little lake that dries up almost every summer, but not this year because there's been so much moisture. They call it Quichapa Lake, and that is a translation into English meaning poop water or shit water. because the water is no good, because it's just like not a real lake, but it looks like a beautiful lake from the freeway. Like, what's that lake over there? And it's this beautiful word, Quichapa, and so we just thought it's perfect. It's a cool word. It's about as local to the region as you can get. The Paiutes all think it's hilarious that we use it, because we're calling our, what they call expensive snob coffee, and we are naming it shitwater coffee, basically, using their traditional language. So it's just really fun.
I find that you got to have a sense of humor. That clearly you do. How are you engaging with people in general? You've got all of these different operations going on, so I imagine it's hard to maintain focus on any one area at any given time. So how are you
Yeah,
engaging with your customers? How can people find you and support you, or get interested in these things?
no, that's true. And we are guilty of, or maybe it's more me, I should take more of the blame, of being a little all over the place. I love talking to people. I love going into roasteries and cafes, seeing what they're doing, talking about, hey, you roast? I'd love to give you some samples. Oh, you don't roast? I'd love to give you some roasted coffee. Just wherever they're at, I want to be able to have a solution. I work with a great a distributor that refurbs La Marzocco's and Slayers, or can get them for me new, so I can outfit people with their cafes with grinders and espresso machines and everything they want. So I love that. But yeah, like our website could really use some love. It's like the pictures aren't great. You can't buy green coffee on Pacifica Renew, but at some point we want to set that up, right? So there's like a huge list of ways, as an actual business goes, our businesses could be better. So mostly we know the people that want the green coffee or the roasted coffee, talk to them, they email, they can text, they can call, they place their orders, and we provide it wholesale. And it works, but it won't scale forever before we have to build out software and they log in and do all that stuff that a lot of people are familiar with. But I also like to think that a lot of people might enjoy the old-timey, old-fashioned way of doing business where, hey, we're going to order. We have to talk to Ben again. Maybe they don't like that, but that's how it is until further notice. But it's great, because that's when I hear feedback like, oh yeah, people are really loving that new 3 Yunnan espresso blend you guys have been selling us. I'm like, oh great, we love it, so we thought they would. Or oh man, yeah, it tells me about regions too. Like, oh, this area isn't loving the natural process. It's a little too fruity, a little too exotic. They want a medium roast. Do we have that kind of coffee? So I love the feedback of direct working with our small customer base. but on the whole, it goes pretty good. We have a couple employees on Pacifica Renew. Our operations manager, Joy, she's in the Bay Area. And then we have Alex, our partner in LA at Chinatown Coffee Roasters. And then we have Trent in Utah. So we're small, we're nimble. Some people asking if they can work for us, but we're not quite ready. And I don't want to ever promise somebody a job if we know we don't have the growth to support them. So I think that there's going to be additional growth in people, but we want to stay ahead of it, not overdo it, I guess.
There's no way we could cover everything that you're doing, in one show, but I'm wondering if there's anything that I didn't ask about or we didn't cover that you want people to know kind of about you, about this company, about your efforts right now in the moment.
I would say we have inadvertently, because of the just luck and the love of our Yunnan coffee, we've sort of pivoted towards that being our focus. Is we think the emerging specialty scene throughout all of Asia, I mean, it's mostly Southeast Asia, obviously, just has so much to offer. And some places that have had coffee forever, like Vietnam and India, well, the reputation is commodity grade coffee, not specialty coffee. So not only are we targeting those geographies for importing and roasting, but also a Canephora Robusta. So we've been bringing in for about a year and a half a delicious high elevation specialty Robusta from Wayanad, India, Southwest India, Kerala region, the Wayanad estate. It's delicious, and it's a Robusta, so it freaks out a lot of specialty guys because like, whoa, what are you doing? And then they try it, and even if they don't love it, they respect it because it's pretty dang good in a different way. In July, we started working with a Future Farm and Karmic Circle to import another specialty Robusta out of South Central Vietnam in the hills. Super yummy. They carbonic macerate it after a natural process. So this is a really tasty one out of Vietnam. And our first shipment was just a small one in July. So now I'm going to spend the next 9 months not only roasting and enjoying it and selling roasted coffee, but sending out these samples to our customer base because it's great. It's got those flavors you love about a specialty Robusta, the earthiness, the full body, kind of like a tobacco, but also nuttiness, no acidity at all, which, freaks us specialty coffee geeks out. But also we super light roast it. I mean, it is super light roasted, like an Ethiopian, like the way I would roast our Yirgacheffe, so it's really tasty. Plus the carbonic maceration gives it this winey fragrance, but that takes a back seat to its varietal flavors. So anyways, so stuff like that, I guess if I wanted people to think of Chinatown Coffee Roasters, Quichapa Coffee, Pacific Renew would be thinking of us as people that have fallen in love with Asian coffees, whether it's established stuff like Indonesia or unheard of stuff like the Yunnans and the specialty Robustas from India and Vietnam. And also we're in talks with Myanmar, Thailand, Philippines. Our operations manager, Joyce, her husband's Cambodian. So there's a lot of potential out there. Some of this is already happening with we're not the first to any of this per se, but it's just something we fall in love with. And I'd be happy to be known as people that do that.
Very cool. Ben, I got one question left for you, and that is when you stop at a coffee shop, maybe you're making that drive between states, what do you order?
I have like two mood swings. I'm either like an espresso boy or a pour over guy, right? So because less shops can afford, really, I call it afford because it's literally like, we can't afford to pay the workers to do pour overs and constantly train them, right? So if it's the shop that can afford to do good single origin pour overs, then I go pour over and I like to get like two of them, or often traveling with my family. So my wife and I each get one and then we get to both try each other's and really enjoy pour overs. Or it's espresso, right? And then I like to either get, well, again, a lot of places can't afford the extra grinder, so they might have their house blend, which is I've noticed is an Ethiopian and a Brazil mix, and then they might have a second grinder, it might be a single origin or something more, outside of the norm. Then I'd get one of each. Or if they just have one, then I might say, okay, I'll try it as a double ristretto and then a cortado. And of course, start with the cortado, because if you start with the ristretto, then all you taste is milk in the cortado. So have the cortado, think about how's it come through the milk. And then, okay, I got my lucky stirring spoon I usually keep in my pocket right here. Let's see here. There you go. Stir up my espresso because I like it stirred, not shaken, not swirled. And yeah, so pour overs and espresso. And my wife's generally the same, Now, oh, crap. One more thing. Hopefully that answered that question. Another thing we're really in love with that's harder to do is decaf. We're like everybody, like you drinking all this coffee and your day is going great, and all of a sudden it's like 4:30. Like, I don't know if I should keep doing this, but then you do, and then you can't sleep. So like in our early roasting experience, we're like, how can we find good decaf, which of course now is a thing, whether it's ethyl acetate, Swiss water, right? And so we love sourcing that through good brokers that have access. We can't do that direct. We haven't figured out how to do that. I mean, we at some point we will. As we get big enough, I'll be sending containers of Yunnan to be Swiss water process or whatever, or mountain and ethyl acetate. I don't really have those relationships with those guys because I don't need it yet. But as we get big enough, I would think it'd be so cool to decaffeinate some of these origins and make great coffee. Because I like to flip that old saying, death before decaf, to death without decaf. Like, how can I drink coffee at 10 o'clock at night without good decaf? So you want good decaf. So we love decaf too.
I'm about to brew a pot of decaf up right now. Ben, I really appreciate. I just got it from Ruby Coffee in Amherst, Wisconsin. I'd have to grab the bag there to be certain of what it is, but just got a whole shipment from them that I'm really excited about. So my wife and I have been doing a lot of decaf, usually about 5, and I brew something up, and we just, it's a way to keep it going in our day, as you mentioned.
Especially when you got Robustas, right? Like, because we have these specialty Robustas, that's on average double the caffeine. So if we are in the mood for our Vietnam or our India, or we do some cool blends, post-roast blends with our Robusta, we got like double the caffeine on those. Then we got to switch to half cap at noon,
I have to switch to half calf earlier than noon even these days. I really do appreciate your time and taking time away from your family and your daily life and the millions of jobs you have. Thanks for being on the show and sharing some of this, and I have no doubt that we'll run into each other again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's fun sharing, and it's cool that people are interested. So, yeah, my pleasure, and I speak on behalf of my whole family. I say our pleasure.
Okay, some key takeaways from today. Ben does a lot of stuff. There's Pacifica Renew, the green coffee importing business, Chinatown Coffee Roasters based in LA, and the new company in Utah, Quichapa Coffee Roasters, whose name has an interesting origin. Ben and his wife Kina were hooked on coffee after early visits to Verve and Intelligentsia. They decided to look for a more economical way to enjoy craft coffee. We could roast our own, they thought, which, yeah, about that. Coffee roasting is rarely the more affordable hobby, but at least this one led them down the path of entrepreneurship. Ben's career in the recycling industry helped him develop a bunch of skills and a foundation of knowledge that really enabled him to begin importing coffee. Getting into Chinese coffee felt right, but the obstacles seemed tremendous. Remember, he was beginning his conversations with potential Chinese partners and fellow coffee friends during the early days of the coronavirus. But Ben has a go-and-get-it attitude towards business, and his belief that you can find good people if you treat people well has led him to his current success, which he and his family share in together. Finally, death without decaf. That feels like a patch waiting to be made. Thanks to Ben for sharing his story today, for his positivity and willingness to fit our chat into his clearly very busy life. You might have noticed that Ben was in the car for the entirety of our chat. You'll find links to all of his businesses, including Pacifica Renew, Chinatown Coffee Roasters, and Quichapa Coffee Roasters, in this podcast's show notes, and of course in our wildly popular newsletter, which you can find at coffeepeoplepodcast.com. And if you find yourself in Southern California over the next month, don't forget to stop by Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Steady State Coffee Roasting, Camp Coffee Company, and or Acento Coffee Roasters to guess how many coffee beans are in the jar. We're running a holiday guessing game contest at all 4. The winners receive $50 gift cards or coffee and merch to the aforementioned, courtesy of this podcast. The contest runs through December 14th. Shout out to the engineers who've been breaking out the graphing calculators at Zumbar and filling that jar with guesses. Thanks to all of the rest of our great industry partners, including our presenting sponsor, Roastar Coffee Packaging. They are an excellent coffee packaging company that tell the big stories of small business coffee roasters. Learn more at roastar.com. Also, Ignite Coffee Company, Maria Coffee, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, Moster Coffee Company, San Franciscan Roaster Company, Crossings Coffee, Civets Roasting Machines, First Light Coffee Whiskey, Hasea Coffee Source, Coffee Cycle Roasting, and Ascend Coffee Roasters, who just launched their holiday sampler sets. Check them out on ascendroasters.com. That's all for today. I need another cup of coffee. This show is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network, and this episode has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Always tip your baristas, and be sure to drink good coffee. Hello? Are you still there? The show is over. I'm out in Joshua Tree National Park taking a breather. But I brought my French press with me, and I'm brewing up pot after pot of Zumbar's Hummingbird blend while I finish my fourth novel, Tomorrow Eli and Tomorrow Jane. If you're looking for a book to read over coffee, you'll find a few that I've written at onewildlifeco.com, link in the show notes. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Talk to you soon.